My name is Ramin, and this presentation I will give you some insights about the European markets and the key trends that are in the European markets. Typically, when we look into the crypto market, we tend to look at the US or the Asian market. But in this presentation, I will explain to you why the European market actually matters, and in some cases, why it's actually even leading the global crypto adoption. So let's start. An independent research firm actually analyzed the crypto spot volume globally, and it showed that in 2023, the global spot volume accounted for $8 trillion US. And what was really interesting about this was that they even analyzed the regional split of trading volume globally. And it showed that the European market actually accounted for 26% of the global spot volume. So that means that over a quarter of the global spot volume is actually being done within Europe, which also means that the European market is actually the second largest market globally. Think about that. And they also showed that if you look into a bull market, that the European market could actually achieve 36 trillion of volume on an annual basis. So that already shows that the European market matters from that perspective. But there is more. We actually see a few trends coming up that will be actually a perfect storm in the European market to further accelerate the adoption of crypto in Europe. And we identify 5, and I'll walk them through you one by one. So first is regulatory clarity. Before the start of this year, Europe was very fragmented from a regulatory point of view. If you wanted to offer crypto services in European countries, each country had their own regulatory framework. In one country, you had to have a license, for example, in Germany. In another country, a registration was sufficient, which was quite light. So, for example, in the Netherlands. And in some other countries, you could just operate without even applying for a license or a registration like Belgium. And this increased uncertainty and also made things very inefficient to operate across Europe. But that has changed as of this year. Since the beginning of this year, MiCAR has come into force. And MiCAR is a European-wide regulatory framework which is harmonizing regulation across Europe. It actually means that if you apply for a MiCAR license in one country, you can start passporting that license and operate across whole of Europe. Similar to how actually also the banking license system works in Bitvavo, works in Europe. Second trend, because of that, is institutional adoption. We expect and see already that due to MiCAR, institutional adoption is accelerating. It's accelerating because there is much more clarity from a regulatory point of view how they can actually access crypto. Before that, institutional clients were very hesitant in going into crypto. There was a lot of uncertainty and they weren't aware how to actually operate that from a compliance and regulatory point of view. But today, you see that changing. You already see a few European banks starting to offer custody services to their clients. You also see asset managers already allocating a certain share of their portfolio into crypto. And already a few fintechs and neobanks are entering into crypto trading. Even this week, one of the largest neobanks in Europe announced that they will offer crypto spot trading to their clients. Third topic and trend is localization over globalization. Europeans prefer local trusted services. That has always been there, and it will only further accelerate in the coming periods. And there's 2 things that you need to know about that. One is from a regulatory point of view. ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority, issued a statement at the beginning of this year where they clarified that each crypto service provider needs to source liquidity on a best execution basis. Next to that, what is really key is that they also strongly encourage European parties to source that liquidity within Europe. So what does that mean? that actually before, those brokers where they would source liquidity would go to offshore exchanges, typically outside of Europe. But however, they now encourage those players to actually source liquidity within Europe. So it's actually trying to protect the flow to stay within Europe. But next to that, also on the retail side, you see something very different. Europe is a very fragmented market from a retail perspective. Whereas, for example, the US is one single market where one size fits all. Europe is very fragmented. Each country has a different language, which also means you need to support those users on a local basis, in a local translation, whether it's the app, whether it's customer support, but also on different areas. If you think about local payment methods, each country has very different payment needs and how people want to on and off ramp when doing crypto trading. For example, in the Netherlands, you have Ideal. In Germany, people prefer PayPal. And also in, for example, Spain, Bizum is very important. So you really need to localize your offering in order to win within Europe. Fourth trend, what we expect is consolidation. Why? Due to MiCAR, the regulation will become much more difficult to operate within Europe. You need to have a license. So it means you need to increase the regulation and the compliance within your company in order to operate as a crypto service provider. On top of that, aside of that it is very tough to get that, it also means additional cost. So local small players that don't have sufficient scale won't be able to burden those costs or meet the regulatory standards, which will result into those operators ceasing their operations. And it will also allow probably that local platforms who do operate in a compliant way will be able to really scale and consolidate the European market. And finally, the key trend, given that there is regulatory clarity, institutional adoption, and all the other items, we expect also that mass adoption will follow in Europe. Why? People will start finding trusted players, whether it's directly starting to trade on the European market or indirectly having a touch with blockchain technology. You already see a few institutional clients on the back end starting to use blockchain technology in order to, for example, facilitate payments, given that blockchain is way more efficient and effective versus the old traditional rails. So we expect, based on these trends, that the volume and the adoption of mass retail in Europe will further accelerate. So now that we actually know that the European market is quite significant and there are a few key trends identified that will further accelerate that adoption, let's also look at how currently the European market is divided amongst the different exchanges. So Kaiko, a global data provider, actually released a paper at the beginning of this year where they analyzed the euro-denominated spot volume within Europe and looked into how the different exchanges were actually competing against each other on that. And it showed that during 2024, Bitvavo was the dominant player in the euro-denominated spot market. They actually accounted during 2024 for over 50% of the market, being a true leader, even bigger than most of the global offshore exchanges that we know. Bitvavo was a clear dominant player. But who is actually Bitvavo and why are they winning in this market? Bitvavo was founded in 2018 and is based in Amsterdam. And a fun fact about Amsterdam is actually that Amsterdam was the first ever exchange globally was built in Amsterdam in the 1600s. And what is actually the purpose of Bitvavo? Bitvavo focuses on serving the crypto market within Europe. They have a strong focus on Europe, and because of that, they're actually operating now in 27 different countries within Europe. And because of that, they actually also now, today, have 2 million users, both on the retail side and on the institutional side. And the 2 million is only the retail clients and institutional clients they are directly accessing, but indirectly through many brokers that are connected to institutional clients, the base of retail clients within Europe that they are attracting and serving is much bigger. And why are they actually winning in this field? It is because given that they focus on Europe, they also localize their product offering. So they really make sure that if they enter a certain market in Europe, the local language is in place, local support is in place. They offer the right payment methods. They even tailor their product into the local behaviors and needs of those clients. And on top of that, what Bitvavo also typically does is that they hire key people in those markets that really live and know how that market works. So it's really in their DNA to localize and understand what's going on in that market. And to validate that, actually in the last bull market, 80% of the new users that joined Bitvavo came through word of mouth. So it actually means that the existing users of Bitvavo are the true ambassadors also of Bitvavo, because they like what they get, it's easy to use, and it's very transparent. If you then look at the last 12 months, Bitvavo traded over 100 billion of volume, and today they have around 9 billion in assets under custody. And regarding the assets under custody, even at the beginning of this year, Bitvavo published a report, a proof of reserves via an independent auditor, showing that all these assets of users and institution clients are one-to-one backed. But there's more. Let's also look into the number of pairs, which are very relevant for retail clients, and also the liquidity. If you look, Kaiko also compared that, and they looked at the euro trading pairs offered per exchange. And what you see there, so Bitvavo is actually the number one on that perspective. They're offering the most euro trading pairs, around 350 at this moment, and constantly adding new projects and tokens on their exchange. So if there's any project or token here interested to be listed on the main gateway of the European market, please reach out to us. Furthermore, liquidity is very essential. It means what's the cost to actually execute a trade on a platform. And Kaiko did a study where they looked into the last 30 days and the average spread for the top 5 tokens. And what you see there is actually from a cost perspective, Bitvavo is the most cost-efficient exchange. So Bitvavo is not only going wide, but they also go very deep in the markets that they actually offer, ensuring that there's always the most cost-efficient exchange and also the most broadest exchange regarding the pairs that they actually offer on their exchange. So, what did we actually saw in this presentation? First, Europe matters. Europe is actually currently representing 26% of the global spot market, and therefore also the second largest and probably one of the most important regions. Second point, MiCAR, the European regulation, will further drive the adoption, creating new opportunities for regulated platforms in the market, where it's institutions coming into the market, but also the consolidation that we probably expect in the European market due to that new framework. And lastly, I think Bitvavo is very well positioned to leverage this momentum. They already showed in the past and today that they represent 50% of the euro-denominated spot volume market. And given that they have a very strong track record and a validation from our users, we expect that adoption will further accelerate. But we don't do that only by ourselves. We work with many different partners in order to achieve that. So in case you're a project that wants to be listed, or a market maker, or another institution, or a custodian or staking provider, we are very keen to further build that crypto ecosystem within Europe. So in case there's any way and how we can collaborate and together build a future within Europe, please reach out to me or someone in the team over here to discuss that. I want to thank you all for your time and the presentation, and I wish you a very good afternoon further here at Token.